Grace stayed with Pinky on her deathbed, and as Pinky uttered her last words, she died. Pinky was Grace's only friend, and as Grace reminisced of the utter loneliness, she wrote a memoir, The Memoir of a Snail. It all began with little Grace and her twin still in the womb. Grace happened to be delivered prematurely, which caused a scar on her face, and right after her twin brother Gilbert was delivered, their mom died. Growing up, Grace had a lot of health issues, and as the doctors tried fixing it, she lost a lot of blood and required an immediate transfusion. Luckily, her twin brother, Gilbert, donated his blood to save his sis. They were enrolled in school where Grace was often bullied and called Rabbit Face because of her scar, but her brother Gilbert would come to her aid every time, teaching the bullies a lesson. Grace had an obsession with snails and loved to keep collections of it, while Gilbert loved all animals and decided to be a vegetarian. Gilbert had an obsession with fire, as he wanted to be a showman just like his father. Their father was a showman in the streets of France and was performing for tourists as usual when he fell in love with a beautiful tourist from Australia and moved to Australia with her, and they got married. He took his showman art to Australia and began performing, but tragedy struck when he was hit by a drunk driver and became paraplegic. His wife was pregnant for the twins at the time and died right after they were delivered. The kids at a young age had to learn how to take care of themselves, and even their dad. Their dad had a weird disorder which made him breathe abnormally when he sleeps, as his children notices it and claps each time it happens and he wakes up. Her dad taught her the art of making stop-motion animations and was also delighted with Gilbert, wanting to be a showman just like he was. Their dad experienced his breathing issues as usual and they clapped for him, but this time he didn't wake up. His children couldn't afford a funeral, so their father's body was cremated by the government, and they placed his ashes in one of his jars. Child Protective Services came around to pick up the children as none of their relatives wanted anything to do with them. The twins were sad as they were going to be separated for the first time in their lives, as they said their goodbyes to each other and left. Grace was adopted by some childless couple in the outskirts of town as they really didn't care much about her and prefer to go on wild adventures. Gilbert wrote letters to Grace as he was also adopted by apple farmers. His new family was weird as they were religious fanatics who forced him to pray to baby Jesus most of the time, and also had to work tirelessly in the apple farm. The twins were now grown as they still write to each other. Grace was lonely and had no friends when she met Pinky for the first time and had a lot of pleasant experiences with her. Gilbert, on the other hand, still had to work in the apple farm with lousy pay, which was later collected by his father as offering for the love of Jesus, which he later used to purchase alcohol for his consumption. None of Gilbert's siblings except for one liked him, and even his adopted mom seemed to think he was possessed by the devil and tried drugging him at a time, but Gilbert noticed and didn't swallow the pills sipped into his meals. She also tried baptizing him to expel the evil spirits, but he pretends to be possessed so that they can get on with it faster. Grace still had an obsession for snails as she bought, piled, and even stole snail items as it began piling up and began to fill her home, but she wouldn't throw some of them away. Grace felt lonely, and just as she was about to give up on love, she met with a guy named Ken who was just at her backyard. It was love at first sight for them, and after series of courtship, Ken finally proposed to her and she accepted. She sent a letter to her twin brother Gilbert and gave him some cash from Ken which he would use to cross the desert, and they will be reunited for the first time in years at her wedding. It was Grace's wedding day, and as Pinky dresses her up, a tragic letter came from Gilbert's adopted parents stating how Gilbert got caught in a church fire and didn't make it. Well, it turns out Gilbert had a secret affair with one of his adopted brothers and were caught by their mom. Homosexuality was a taboo in the family as both brothers were tied up and tortured to purge out the homosexuality spirit in them, but Gilbert couldn't take it anymore and broke out of his restraints, ran to the church and began to set the church on fire. His adopted mom shut the church door from behind, and he was burned alive. Grace shed tears on her wedding day, but as time passes, she tried moving on as Ken was there for her and loved feeding her and seemed to love her more anytime she added weight. Grace tried stealing some more snail items, but this time she was caught and was to appear in court in a latter date for sentencing. Grace was thinking about herself one day when she spotted her guinea pig munching on what seemed to be Ken's journal, and as she read it, she was horrified as Ken didn't love her. He was only interested and obsessed with her fat, in a fetish kind of way. That's why he kept feeding her to gain more weight. Grace didn't want anything to do with Ken and kicked him out. Pinky, her only friend, moved in with her, cared for her, and also placed her on diet which made her lose weight. As the time passes, Pinky grew older, and she developed Alzheimer and began to lose touch with reality, so it was now Grace's turn to care for her. On her deathbed, she uttered the word potatoes right before she died. She was cremated and Grace poured her ashes in Pinky's garden just like she always wanted. Grace felt utterly lonely now, and was about to end her own life when she finally realized the potatoes Pinky was referring to. She digs up the part of the garden with the inscription, potatoes, and found some items belonging to Pinky, some cash, and the most important of all, a letter for Grace. In the letter, Pinky advised Grace to let go of all her crazy obsession, shed and grow a new shell just like the snail. Grace decided to heed Pinky's advice as she cleared out all her snail collections. She appeared in court for sentencing, but the judge was a man which she helped a long time ago, as he repaid the favor and cleared her of all charges. Grace rekindled her interest in stop-motion animation, and as she displayed it before the audience and asked if they had any questions, one of the audiences raised his hand. Grace was shocked as the person was Gilbert. Well, it turns out Gilbert didn't die in the church fire, as he was able to escape through the church window. After so many years, the twins were finally reunited as they thought of better days ahead. That was how the movie ended. If you love stop-motion animations, subscribe to It's Mythical for more amazing recaps like this. Thanks for watching.